Rest in peace, Rudy Collective. If you have been here for a while, you know that I'm a nurse. And if you know anything about hospitals, nurses have spooky stories. So we have a nice, gloomy, thunderstormy day today. Today is as good a day as any to look at some spooky nurse stories with me. So let's get into these.
Stay awake and stay rooted.
Okay, stick with me on this story. I'm going to try to go a little fast. I have had many jobs in nursing. One of them has been a home health job. So I would go to people's homes. The company would give me an address and I would go to their home. I wouldn't know anything about the home, but usually it was a nice little old lady or something to that effect. And then they would usually feed me and it was sweet. Okay, this is the totally opposite scenario, like the worst case scenario you can ever imagine. So they give me this address. I go to this home. It is a 3-story home in a bad area of downtown Tacoma, Hilltop area. It has a fence around it. Everything is run down. It's in a bad area. I get sort of an odd vibe. Not really a horrible bad like leave now vibe, but just bad. There's a guy standing out in the yard. He says, "Are you looking for blankety blank?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Well, you've come to the right place. Come on inside." So I get my bag and I go on inside. Mind you, we are not supposed to tell anybody where we are. Only person that knows is the company. And this company was remote. It was in another state. So in order to get a hold of them, I have to call an 800 number and wait on hold for like 10 minutes. I walk inside this house. It's very dark inside, almost like nighttime. Very few lights. There are multiple men roaming around the house. I notice an ankle bracelet on one. I say nothing. The patient that I see sits down at a table across from me and casually says, "You're probably wondering why there's so many men in this house." Now, to count, there were 12. He says, "This is a halfway house for sex offenders." So me, 5'2", big boobs, triple D, I'm sitting in there by myself as the only female with 12 sex offenders in the house. He looks at me straight in the eyes and says, "I have had 89 out of 90 felonies that were violent. Only one was not violent." I look at him back directly in the eyes and I said, "Cool." The situation was immediately diffused. I did his full assessment. Everything was fine. Literally no one else said one word to me. I left the house, called my significant other, and told him exactly where my work had sent me without telling me jack shit. Then I called my work and thanked them so much for putting me in that horrible situation in which I could have been.
I wouldn't call them and thank them for putting me in that horrible situation. I would have called them and said, effective immediately, I freaking quit. Not a spooky story, but that is terrible.
I'm going to tell you about the scariest thing that has ever happened to me while being a nurse, and it happened at my old hospital that I worked at for a couple years. And I had a patient one day. She had cirrhosis of the liver, so she was terminal, and she passed away in just a really terrible way. I went home, got a few hours of sleep, went back to work, and I was doing my first morning patient rounds at 5:30 a.m. I had a patient at the end of the hall, and it just happened to be just across the way from the patient who had passed away the night before. And as I'm walking out of this patient's room after checking on him, I kind of glance over into her room, and it was completely empty, because we had cleaned out all of her belongings. But I saw my charge nurse standing at her window, and she was looking very intently out the window at something. And I'm like, what are you doing? I said she was in there. I could see her silhouette. So it was really dark, and the sun was just starting to come up enough for me to see the silhouette of her body. And I'm like, what are you doing in here? And she slowly like turns her body and she looks at me and doesn't say anything. So I'm like, okay, weirdo, you're like starting to freak me out. Seriously, why are you in here? And I flipped the light switch on, and as soon as the lights came on, no one was there.
Did she say she worked night shift? No way. I that's why I freaking like night shift.
Got an email from a nurse who we're just going to call Danny to tell me about her supernatural experience while working night shift in the hospital. She said that currently she works in the ER, but this story actually took place when she was working in labor and delivery. And I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but she said she was working on the floor where like moms are on like bed rest, and she would work night shift. The night that this story takes place, Danny knows she doesn't have many patients on the floor, and it's only going to be her working. But even though she's going to be by herself, she doesn't feel scared because she knows it's very secure. Like, if anyone wants to come in, she's going to have to buzz them in, or if they're going to get in through the doors, they're going to need a special key card. Danny told me that she gets her patients tucked in for the night, makes sure that everyone is comfortable, and then everyone drifts off to sleep. She told me that when she worked night shift, she would bring a book with her, so she was settling in just to read for like the next 8 hours. As she's sitting at the nurse's station, call light starts to go off, but it's for room 17, and she knows there's no one in room 17. She gets up, she walks to room 17, she looks around, it's pitch dark, there is definitely no one in there. She goes to the call light and she shuts it off. While she did think that was odd, she was just like, maybe just like a malfunction, it happens. Goes back to the nurse's station, starts to read again. When she starts reading again, she hears a TV blaring and she realizes it's coming from room 17. So she walks back to room 17, looks around, still dark, definitely no one in there, shuts the TV off. Once again, this really doesn't scare her. She is coming up with logical explanations for what is happening. She's thinking maybe there's just like something wrong with the electrical in that room. I don't know. But she looks around, makes sure that everything is shut off, and then goes back to the nurse's station and starts to read again. Just a few minutes later, as she's reading, she hears someone running down the hallway. She says it sounds like someone when they're running very quickly in bare feet, but like a kid, like a toddler. She puts her book down, she gets up, she goes, she looks around, nothing is there. She goes to read again. Same thing happens again. She is hearing someone running down the hallway. Puts her book down, goes to look, nothing. At this point, she is starting to feel uneasy, so she calls down to the labor and delivery floor and asks them to send someone up because she wants to go and talk to her charge nurse and let her know kind of what's going on and what is happening. I don't know. So they send someone up, and Danny is like, hey, thanks for coming. I'm going to talk to the charge nurse. Like, I'll be right back. I just need a few minutes. As Danny starts to head down the hallway, she glances into a room and she realizes that what she is seeing is a woman standing in that room, like outside the window. But Danny's thinking, I'm on the 3rd floor and there is no way that someone is standing outside that window. And she says she was walking by so fast that she almost missed it, but when she saw it, she was like, hold on, and she backed up. As she was registering what she was looking at, and she could make out details, she could see this woman. She could see that she was wearing a green dress. As she's standing there trying to figure out how this woman is hovering outside of this 3rd-story window, she realizes it's a reflection, and this woman is standing behind me. So Danny says she whips around, there's nothing there. At this point, she is booking it to the charge nurse's office. She gets there, she's talking to the charge nurse, and she's like, I don't really know what is going on. The charge nurse looks at her and she says, the way that I'm going to answer you is going to depend on how you answer one question. And Danny is like, what? And the charge nurse asks her, do you believe in ghosts? And Danny said, yeah, I guess so. Why not? So the charge nurse goes on to tell Danny that the floor that she is working on and this unit that she is working on is haunted. Now at this point, Danny has not given the charge nurse the description of the woman that she saw in the reflection of the window. The charge nurse asks Danny, have you seen the woman in the green dress yet? I'm going to tell you what, Danny is better than me because she is still a nurse. And at that point, I would have been putting him at 2 weeks, switching careers. I'm going to go be an accountant. I'm going to be an arborist. But the charge nurse tells Danny that on that floor, they have their resident spirits and sometimes spirits that are just passing through. Where that actual unit is located is right above the morgue. The charge nurse told her that over the years, there have been reports of hearing footsteps, weird things happening in certain rooms, the woman in the green dress, and even screaming being heard. After Danny gets this explanation and realizes what is happening, she goes back to work like nothing happened. The rest of the night goes on uneventful. She does end up staying and working in this unit for quite some time before switching to emergency room. And she said that she just shifted the way she did things. She would keep like TV shows on. Whenever she was doing something, she would talk out loud, like letting the spirits know what she was doing, and they never bothered her after this. She did tell me that was her creepy experience working in labor and delivery, but she has more from the emergency department. If we would like to hear those, I emailed her back and I said, yes, obviously, please. We would love to hear them. As always, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope that everyone has a wonderful day.
She was a good one. Because what do you mean you sent me to a unit that is right above the morgue and you didn't tell me? And then when I come and ask you, you ask me before I can even tell you about the lady in the green dress. That would have been useful information to know before I got to this unit. Yeah, she is better than me. I'm like this girl here. I would have been giving my 2 weeks and moving on somewhere else. Maybe still in nursing, but not at that facility.
Okay, I got you. But put your big girl panties on because this one is terrifying. This story didn't personally happen to me, but I have to share it with you all because it is one of the scariest stories I have ever heard. I'm also going to preface this by saying I can't give exact locations or name of patients, but this also happened in the Appalachia region. So one of my really good friends, we will call him Bob, was working as a paramedic. The dispatcher was like, we just got a call, we need you to run out to this house. The patient wasn't saying anything. They were just breathing really heavy on the other end of the phone. So Bob was like, okay, just some heavy breathing on the other end of the phone, but anytime there's a call, they have to go respond. I mean, this person could have been in such respiratory distress that they really needed medical help. They pull up to the house. It's this super long driveway, and it's actually a big, massive home. But he said as soon as he pulled up, it just didn't feel right. Like, even though the house was huge, it had been like run down. Like there was a lot of weeds in the front yard. The grass was super overgrown, and there was an in-ground pool, but the pool had been drained of all the water, and there was like weeds and stuff coming up through the cement of the pool. Bob and his partner go inside the home. Everything is dark. The only thing that's lit up inside the house is a TV, and it's not like a new flat screen TV. It's one of those old box TVs, and it's on just like the white static. He's immediately creeped out, but he's like yelling for the patient, like, hello, EMS here, someone called out, labored breathing, hello. Nobody answers. So they kind of start searching the house to find the patient. Bob and his partner walk upstairs and they hear a door in the hallway creak open very slowly. This frail little lady is in one of those little electric wheelchairs with like the little bloop, bloop, bloop. And she just slowly comes out of this door, but she doesn't say anything. They're like, ma'am, EMS here. Are you okay? How can we help you? She doesn't say a peep. She reaches into her jacket pocket and pulls out a note that says, help, he has a gun. This is when Bob actually starts panicking, and he was like, this is becoming too much for us and we need police backup. Bob said he was going to try to pick up the little old lady out of her electric wheelchair to take her downstairs and get her to safety. But as soon as him and his partner started to do that, he heard noise coming from another bedroom upstairs. It was at this time Bob made the decision, we've got to go get backup. Like, we need additional help or we're all going to get hurt. Him and his partner speed outside to get back into the truck. And as they were running outside towards the truck, they heard one of the bedroom windows open and a man yelling at them to get the heck off of their property. This is the craziest part though. Bob gets back in his truck, starts to leave the driveway to get to safety, calls police. Police are dispatched to the house. Nobody's there. The house had been foreclosed on years ago and nobody lived at that residence. I'm like, Bob, you are making this up. He's like, Sydney, no, I swear to God, I know what I saw. There was a lady in there. There was a man, possibly with a gun, because I heard noise coming from another bedroom and he was shouting at me as I was leaving the property. So, I don't know, but it still gives me chills. It still terrifies me. Let me know what you think about this story in the comments. And if you want to hear more spooky stories, then follow along. I got you.
Man, you had chills. Can you imagine this man going into this house and this little old lady coming out in her little electric scooter giving him this little note and thinking you about to be... And then them saying there is nobody there. Didn't she say, though, he went there with his partner? So his partner should have been able to confirm everything that he said. Oh, my God.
Disclaimer, I don't suggest that you watch this video at night by yourself or while you're working night shift. In an ICU in Kentucky, there was this patient that was experiencing all sorts of hallucinations. They have a video camera in the ICU, which is pretty common now, and they captured this on camera. Does that not look like some sort of demon on top of the patient? The patient died just 3 hours after the nurse took this picture. What is that?
So this is an incredible photo. We got two things happening. One, glitch in the camera, something weird with the lighting. Definitely a man-made experience influencing it, but that is happening because a spirit did enter the room. Two things can be true. What I'm feeling is the bottom part of that is the being. The top half is something else. It's some sort of glitchy thing. And it's trying to take advantage of those that are in somewhat of a weakened space as they pass over. This patient was fine, moved to the light, never bothered by it. But these dark beings tend to do that because they are frustrated, angry, not sure why they're there. A lot of times very scared to move to the other side because they know they weren't that great in this life. Definitely made its way into this room, causing the glitch.
Why the heck, and I have seen this before, and I always thought, why the heck does it look like a knock-kneed horse standing on top of the patient? That is exactly what that looks like.
Hospitals are supposed to heal you, but some wards aren't for the living. I used to work the night shift at an old psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with peeling paint, flickering fluorescent lights, and a smell that never quite left your clothes. People said the building had history. Patients disappearing, doctors leaving mid-shift without explanation. But I didn't care. I needed the money. At first, nights were boring. Routine checks, handing out meds, making sure the patients didn't wander off. Then came the nights that didn't feel like nights anymore. It started with the whispers, soft, almost playful. Not from the patients, these were empty rooms. I'd be walking down the hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing, and I'd hear my name. Jessica. Jessica. At first, I thought I was tired, maybe hallucinating. But then I saw her. A nurse, I think. All white uniform, old-fashioned, hair pinned back tightly. She appeared at the end of the hallway, just standing there. No face, just black emptiness where features should have been. And every time I blinked, she was closer. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe another employee messing with me? But no one else worked those late hours. And the patients? They never mentioned seeing her. One night, I stayed late, finishing paperwork. The main hall was empty, the air thick, heavy. Then the lights flickered. When they came back, she was there, leaning over the chart I was writing on. I froze. My pen slipped and I heard it. You don't belong here. I ran down the hall, through the wards. All the doors were open, all the rooms empty, except for her, always just far enough behind to keep pace, like the shadow of someone who shouldn't exist. Her footsteps never made a sound, but I can feel them on my neck. I made it to the exit. Doors locked, windows barred, my radio wouldn't work. And then the whispering started everywhere. Not just her voice, hundreds of voices, chanting, murmuring, crying. I covered my ears, pressed my face to the floor, but it didn't stop. By morning, the sun burned through the grime-streaked windows, and I was alone. Or so I thought. On my clipboard, in neat handwriting I didn't recognize, was a note. See you tonight. I quit that night. I never went back, but sometimes when I walk past an empty hospital building, I feel her, watching, waiting, patient, hungry. So I ask you, if the forgotten wards of a hospital remember you, how long before they decide you belong to them? If you've ever felt the eyes of someone or something just behind you when no one's there, DM your story. We'll share it live. only on Madam Fair.
First of all, audio A1, visuals amazing. But see you tonight? I think not. She did what I would have done and quit. But here's the thing, what if this thing is attached to her now, and whatever hospital she goes to, it's going to be there? What if?
I've been getting a lot of pandemic stories, so here's another one. Hi, Manfield. I'm a night shift nurse in Southern Ontario, and I wasn't going to send this, but I can't forget it. It happened in 2020, during the height of the pandemic. I was working at an understaffed hospice center. Late nights, heavy hearts, just saw a lot of people leave us. But this was different. It was my third night in a row, room 3B. Mr. Desjardins. He'd been comatose for 2 days. No family, no visitors, I remember, because he was completely unresponsive. Until 3:27 a.m. That's when he sat up, eyes still closed, and whispering, "She's in the vent." I thought I misheard him, but he said it again, louder. "She's in the vent. She's listening." Then he smiled. Not a peaceful smile, a knowing one, like he was in on something that I wasn't. I tried to calm him down, but he grabbed my wrist tight. "You'll hear her fall when the lights flicker. That's how she moves." Then he flatlined. I told the on-call doctor. She said it was just terminal agitation. But that same night, the lights in room 3B flickered twice, then went out when I came back later to gather his things. The vent above his bed was open, and something small and round had fallen onto the pillow. It was a human molar. I didn't sleep after that. A week later, another patient, room 3C, rang the emergency bell non-stop at 3:30 a.m. When I got there, she was crying. "I heard something," she said, "something crawling beside the wall. It was whispering." I asked, "What'd it say?" She said, "Next shift." I transferred 2 months later. I still feel it sometimes. You know, that cold breath in the air vents, especially when the hallway lights stutter for no reason. So I ask, is death always silent, or do some spirits crawl back for company? If you've ever worked in a place where something stayed behind, DM your story. We'll share it live only on Madam Fair. Because in some hospitals, not every discharge is final.
100%. 100%. I may have to subscribe to her, because the vent lady is, I feel like, following her, maybe. So this is the second one where I feel like the vent person, the spirit is following the person.
This woman had to have some kind of major surgery, and she ended up in a rehabilitation facility. She said it was a nice facility. She said tons of nurses, doctors walking around. But she couldn't help but notice that there was this one nurse who never talked, never spoke. She would just walk in, give her pills, and walk back out. After about a week of being at the facility, she decided to ask one of the nurses. She said, "Hey, who is this nurse? She's usually here on these days, and she usually comes in at this time." And the nurse was like, "The person you're describing, I don't know who that is." So because she talked to a million people, she decided the next time she saw the nurse, she was going to take a picture of her. So the day comes where she sees this woman, the nurse that she was describing to everyone. And the nurse never looks at her. She never says anything. She hands her the pill cup and she turns her back towards her. So the woman was like, "Okay, since I can't get her face, I'm going to get the back of her. Maybe somebody knows her from the back of her." And she picks up her phone to take a photo. She didn't have it on silent, and it made the click sound. When the nurse heard the clicking, she turned around and it completely went dark in the room. The woman is terrified because when she looks towards the door closes by itself. She doesn't see anyone coming in. She doesn't see anyone going out. The woman starts panicking because then she feels hands all over her, holding her down, her hands, her feet, her upper body. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know how long this was happening to her, but she just knows that when another nurse walked in, it completely stopped. A week goes by and the woman is walking around with physical therapy, and when she's with her therapist, she just happens to glance to her left in one of the rooms. She sees that nurse again, and she decides, I'm going to do some investigating because she's sure that nurse is not alive. While investigating, she found out that the rehab facility she was in was not the original building. They demolished the original building in 1980, and it was built in 1910. So she asked them, she said, do you guys have old stuff from the building? Do you have pictures of what it used to look like? Pictures of nurses? The supervisor had all of these old framed pictures of nurses who worked there over the years. The way that you were describing the nurse in the email, this is what I got. I guess I just want to know why you thought a nurse that was wearing a whole 1910s, 1920s get up was your nurse. But anyway, moving on. She gets home and now everything is fine. She's feeling like she's getting back to normal. She's able to move around by herself quite a bit. Her husband, on the other hand, said that she's acting weird in her sleep. She said, how am I acting weird? He said, you just been sleepwalking. That's something that you never did. She's trying to find a comfortable spot. She turns towards the door and in walks the nurse from the facility. She tries to wake her husband up, but he's not budging. So she, tries to jump up, and the woman pushes her back down in the bed and places her hand over her mouth. While she's glancing around the room with her mouth still covered by the nurse, she clear as day sees her bed is surrounded by familiar faces from those photos that she looked at. She sees some of the patients. She sees nurses and doctors. She was hoping that her husband would wake up and he would see a glimpse of this so he knows that she is not crazy, because she told him about it and he does not believe her. She passes out, and that's all she remembers. She remembers coming to in the morning and remembers her husband coming to wake her up. She's never seen a ghost or any of that, so this is new for her. She doesn't know how to react. She doesn't know who to go to or what to do. Months have passed, and things have gotten worse. The woman is pregnant now, and she still sees the nurse lurking around the house. The woman decides to call the rehab facility where she was staying. She tells them, oh, this is my room. I don't know if you remember me. My name is this. And the nurse on the other end of the phone was like, oh, yeah, I remember you. And she says, remember when I looked at those photos and X, Y, and Z? And she's like, yeah. She's like, what kind of nurses were those? What was that building before it was demolished? And she told her it was an insane asylum. The woman is close to her due date, and she really is just panicking. She doesn't know what to do, mainly because she's about to bring her baby into this home that is being haunted by an insane asylum nurse. While her husband's at work, she's walking down the stairs with the laundry basket, and she can clear as day hear someone humming in her ear the happy birthday song. She quickly turns around, and she's face to face with the insane asylum nurse. Before she could take a step back, the nurse pushed her down the stairs. The baby was born prematurely, but her and her husband are terrified because this insane asylum nurse just won't go away. They see her on the baby monitor camera. They can hear her on the baby monitor in the kitchen whenever they're downstairs, when they're upstairs. It just never ends. Girl, now you got my blood pressure high and got me worried about you.
That nurse said, oh, you want to take my picture, do you? I can do you one better. You can see me for the rest of your life. And she went home with her. I was so scared when she said she pushed her down the stairs that she was going to lose her baby. But thank God she didn't. But can you imagine? First of all, why is the husband always the last person to believe? You always have to have something proven to you in order to believe it. And now you're seeing the thing on the baby monitor. Now you're hearing it. But I feel so bad for her because this nurse is with her for the rest of her life. This insane asylum nurse. I am just hoping that it does not affect the child.
I don't know if you're ready for this one, but the stories that came out of this question, if you're a night CNA nurse, what's the scariest paranormal thing you've witnessed while on a shift? And the comments, I hope this isn't hitting your FYP at night. Also, nurses who work the night shift, are you guys okay? I was in the hallway with my schizophrenic patient, and she liked to sit with me at night to keep me safe, she said. One night, I kept feeling like I seen black figures in 2 rooms. She kept saying, he's here, he's not nice, run. The 2 rooms I kept seeing black figures in, 2 people died that night, and after I cleaned them and the bodies were gone, she said, "He's still hungry. Stay with me a little longer." I stayed over 30 minutes. There was a fatal accident on the way I take home. I should have been in that spot at the exact time the accident happened, but I stayed over because she told me to. I still think about it. I had a married couple sharing a room. The wife had terminal cancer but was lucid and active. The husband was bedridden, couldn't move or speak. She would turn her call light on whenever he needed assistance. She told us she was afraid when she was gone that we would not check on him and attend to his needs. I assured her we would. She passed away, and a few nights later, the call light came on. All of us on duty just looked at one another because we knew he couldn't have done it. Sure enough, he needed to be changed. It happened a few more times and stopped. I guess she saw that we would take care of him and she could move on. I have many stories. One time I was helping a resident in bed when her roommate said, "Get your brother out of here." I said, "I'm sorry, what did you say?" She said, "He's trying to take me out on a date. Get him out." My older brother passed right before I became a CNA. He used to joke about taking older women out on dates. Not night shift, but I had a resident with dementia that was going to pass any moment, and he couldn't remember he was married. And then he randomly introduced me to his wife. I had a conversation with her. I saw her, then she asked if he was ready. He said yes, and passed. I stepped out so she could have privacy and told the head nurse. She then told me she had passed 5 years ago, and when we went back to see who was in there, she was gone. I later saw a picture of her and realized I saw and spoke to his dead wife before she helped him go in the afterlife. Everyone that was actively dying would say something like, "Tell the kids to stop running around in here." It was previously a children's ward. Everyone dying in one room would describe the same little girl in it. There's so much more. I'm going to probably do a part 2, but tell me in the comments if you've ever experienced anything crazy during a night shift.
Do y'all believe in ghosts or spirits or anything like that? Well, I do. And you know what they say about working in them nursing homes, especially during third shift. I'm going to give y'all a little short, spooky story time. I used to work in Chelsea, Michigan at this facility. It was a nice facility. And it was before I was a CNA, so I was just a resident aide. It wasn't third shift, but it was the end of second shift. It was probably like 10 o'clock. We didn't get up till like 11 p.m. So it was me and my coworker. I'm gonna just say her name, Jessica. And we was pretty much ready or getting ready to go. And we had this lady, let's say her name is Betty. She was in her 90s. Let's say her name is Betty. She came out of her room. Now, mind you, Betty never come out her room. Like, for nothing. She got everything she needed in her room, including a bathroom and shower and stuff like that. So me and her, my coworker, we just chilling, and we happen to see her. We like, "Is that Betty?" So we rush over to her, ask her, "What's going on? Are you okay?" Because it's 10 o'clock at night, mind you, and this woman usually is asleep by now. And a little backstory, my coworker that is with me, she has psychic abilities. So she is able to see, sense ghosts, which I believe she can for real. But yeah, so Betty, she says out her mouth, she said, "I can't go to sleep because there's a black man in my room." So I'm looking at my coworker like, so we just like, let's walk her down to the room and see what she's talking about. Now I'm already preparing myself mentally because I know it's not no black man. I'm like, who is she talking about? Like, we don't even, like, our coworker, we don't have no black man that work over here, like an actual African-American man. So I'm like, who is she talking about? So we get to her room. I'm looking around, my coworker looking around. We don't see nothing. Now, she got a bathroom to the left when we walk in her room. So you walk in, to the left is the bathroom, and then it's her home room to, the rest of the room. So we looking around. We didn't see nothing. And my coworker's like, "Yeah, I don't see nothing. I don't know what you're talking about." Until we look in the bathroom. I went in the bathroom first because I don't have no type of abilities. I don't know what's going on. So I'm just peeking in there. And my coworker, she behind me, and I turn around and look at her. And she just staring. Like this. So naturally, I got scared as fuck. Yeah. So I'm like, what you see? So she finally said something. She was like, it's right there in the bathroom. Me being logical, I'm like, what's in the bathroom? She was like, it's a spirit in the bathroom. So I fly out the room. And my coworker, she's still in there just staring away. So I'm asking her questions like, is it a good spirit, a bad spirit? And she said it was a bad spirit. So I'm like, how can you tell? Like, how can you tell? She basically explained it like she could see shadows, and it was a dark, heavy, negative shadow. She said she could feel the energy, and it was a very dark shadow. She said if it was a good spirit, it would be like a light, shadowy looking thing instead, I guess. But yeah, I guess so. This man was just standing in her bathroom. Yeah. And Betty seen him. And she was not messing with this man. She did not want to go back in there. And literally, she would not. She didn't. She didn't go back in there. We left at 11, and I don't know what she did after that. I kind of want to start a series about this. So if y'all got some spooky stories, nursing home stories, send it to me, and I will tell it on here.
Now, that's what Betty meant then. She didn't mean it was a black person like me. She meant it was an actual dark shadow figure that she saw.
Today I'm going to be reading some spooky stories submitted by nurses. Why did I make this face like if nurses were scary? Number 1. I'm going to be reading some spooky stories submitted by nurses. No, we need to switch this bad attitude. I am positive. I'm positive. Night shift whispers, and I am already terrified. On a quiet night in OB with no patients to attend to, my colleague Jenny and I dedicated ourselves to restocking supplies and conducting routine checkups, anticipating a relaxed shift ahead. While Jenny handled the labor rooms, I took charge of the nursery, focusing particularly on the special care section nestled at the back. It was there, amidst the silence, that a gentle whisper carrying my name broke the stillness. Assuming it was Jenny, I ventured towards the desk area, finding it unexpectedly empty. Shrugging it off, I returned to my task in the special care unit. Moments later, Jenny appeared. A puzzled look across her features. "Did you call for me?" she inquired. As we exchanged stories, a chill crept over us. She heard her name in the same tender murmur that I heard mine. We found ourselves grappling with an unsettling realization. Our unit, secured for infant protection, couldn't be breached by outsiders, yet the whispered names, soft as a sigh, led us questioning if, perhaps, we weren't alone as we believed. See, if I experienced that by myself, I could just lie to myself and be like, oh, I thought I heard something. But 2 people confirming that they heard their names being called? Unseen forces at the nursing station. It was well past midnight, and there I was, focused on charting, alone at the nurse's station in an older nursing home. Out of nowhere, all the charts flew off the shelf as if pushed by invisible hands. I was out of there so fast, I snatched up my belongings and ran to the other station. Never in my career had I witnessed such an unexplainable phenomenon, especially since the shelf was perfectly intact on the wall. I insisted on company for the rest of the night. I would have insisted on company for the rest of the time that I worked there, because what the heck? The unsettling tale of Colleen's last escape. During my tenure as a nurse manager at a community nursing home, I encountered an inexplicable occurrence while covering for a sick supervisor during the night shift. At precisely 2:50, an unnerving symphony began as every door alarm simultaneously erupted into frantic buzzing. Initial disbelief led me to suspect a system malfunction because the scenario of multiple residents attempting to escape seemed implausible. I rallied my team, particularly the newer members, to inspect each door. The relentless alarms persisted for an agonizing 20 minutes until a veteran CNA returned from her break. She assessed the chaos, the alarms, and then me, clutching the control box, and declared matter-of-factly, "Open the window, Colleen wants out." Skepticism made her insistence seem like a dark joke, but her intensifying urgency couldn't be ignored. "She'll grow angry, open the window." Compelled, I opened the window. In an instant, the alarm ceased across every floor, right down to the basement, and all was quiet again. The memory sends shivers down my spine to this day, heightened by the image of the open window curtains billowing as though a presence had swept through them, chasing an unseen escape. Colleen, as it turned out, was a resident of our home, passing away at 108 with no kin to mourn her. That night, it seemed she had one last journey to make.
Tell me, what's the creepiest experience you ever had in your life and why you still think about them?
So I was working ICU at my old hospital in Alabama, and I had a patient who was actively dying, and she was comfort care only, meaning that we had all accepted that she was dying, her family had accepted it, and we were just keeping her comfortable. So I would go in every hour and check on her, and sometimes she wanted to talk. So I go in and it's 11 or 12 at night, and she says, "Who's that little boy that keeps coming to my door?" And I said, "I don't know. What does he look like?" And she said, "He's about 2 or 3 years old. He's wearing a little red suit. He just comes to the door and stares at me." And I said, "I'm not sure. This is an adult ICU, so there shouldn't be children in here." And I said there shouldn't be children, but I knew. There was one. There was a little boy who would come and visit the patients, and the patients would see him, and then they would pass away within 24 hours. And I knew that was who she was seeing. So I just kept her company, kept coming in, and a couple hours later I come in and she wanted to hold my hand. So we're holding hands and she's talking and she looks at me and she says, "Honey, when I'm gone, make sure you take care of Bruce." And I got chills all over my body because Bruce is my dad's name. And I said, "Who is Bruce?" And she said, "You know who he is. You look just like him." And I do. I look exactly like my dad. And I said, "What do I need to take care of? What do I need to do?" And she said, "You just watch over him. Make sure he doesn't fall." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she drifted off to sleep. And I walked out. And a couple hours later, her daughter came in to visit. And I asked her daughter, "Do you know anybody named Bruce? Your mom was talking about a Bruce last night." And the daughter said, "No, I don't know anybody named Bruce." And I said, "You don't have any siblings or cousins or anything?" And she said, "No." She said, "I'm an only child. As far as I know, it was my mother's only pregnancy. So I don't think it would even be maybe a child that she had lost." She said, "We don't know anyone named Bruce." So I went home and I thought about that all day. And when I came back in that night, my patient had passed away. How about the ICU has a little pediatric Grim Reaper? How about that first? And you knew she was talking to you about your father. She said you look just like him. So why would you ask her daughter if she knew Bruce? The lady was telling you to take care of your father.
Story time about my first ever paranormal experience in my first ever healthcare job. So I just turned 17, landed my first ever job as a healthcare support worker in a local care home where I lived. It was literally 2 minutes up the road. And yeah, I was really excited to start this care home. So just a bit of context about the care home. Part of it used to be an old church. So opposite the care home there was a vicarage where the vicars would stay when they travelled up to the church, and then on the back of the home there was a graveyard. That's not relevant. I've never seen anything in that part of the home. Kind of sets the scene for something a bit spooky. So yeah, a couple months in, they rotated me on for night shift, and I'd never done a night shift there, and I was rotated on with another girl. I think there was about 30 residents, so it was just us two looking after these residents. So yeah, got on halfway through the night shift. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we got up to do our checks, our 2-hourly checks, just to, you know, give pressure care relief, check if anyone needed anything. Anyway, just to set the scene, when we went upstairs, there's a really, really long landing, and at the end of the landing is a big window, and when you look out the window, it's a painted glass window that looks into the manager's office. The office is always locked. It's got residents' petty cash in, so it is never open. unless the manager is in there. We don't have access to those keys. So yeah, anybody being in there was virtually impossible. The manager wasn't in there. Anyway, was walking along this landing, and as I was walking along, it caught my eye that I thought I saw someone moving in there. But it was 3 o'clock in the morning, my first ever night shift that I'd ever done. I was only 17. And I thought delirium has officially set in. I'm going crazy. So I turned around and said to my colleague, I swear I've just seen someone in that office. She was like, no way. I said, no, like genuinely, I think I've seen someone in that office. Anyway, we both walked to the end of the landing, and we both pressed our faces against this window to look directly opposite into the manager's office, into the different building. Now this room was dark, obviously, but it was lit up by the desktop screen that was left on, so the whole room was lit up blue. You could still see into the room, you could see the chair and the computer and other bits in the room. And as we've pressed our face against this window, clear as day, you can see someone with what I'd only describe as a flat cap walking around that office. And as we've pressed our faces against that window and looked, it looked as though he turned and looked at us, and both of us, I genuinely am telling the truth, both of us pulled away at the same time, looked at each other, and that was it. That was it. We were freaked out for the rest of the night. We didn't leave each other's sides. We literally stuck together for the rest of that shift. And then in the morning, all the day staff came on, and some of them had been working there for years, like 15, 16 years. And we were telling them about this experience, about how crazy it was, like how we can't explain it. I don't know what it was. They were not shocked. When I tell you, some of them had like numerous ghost stories from their shifts. One colleague even turned around and said to me, why do you think I don't do night shift here? Great, thanks for telling me. I'm 17, for God's sake. But that is a story that I tell people, and to this day they're like, nah. But I genuinely can't explain it. And like, even working in a hospital, I've heard noises and like call bells have gone off, like other people have said that's happened to them. And sometimes you can explain these things away, like, oh, it just must be a fault or whatever. But I genuinely cannot explain what me and someone else seen at the same time, and we both seen the same thing, and it being virtually impossible. No one was in that office. It was just us two in that building. So yeah, that was my first ever paranormal encounter in care. I've never seen anything since, and that is the only time that I've ever laid eyes on anything like that. But it is creepy enough 10 years later that I still tell people that story, and I still think about it all the time, and I think about what it was, who it was. But yeah, crazy. Yeah.
This is another one of those incidences where it would have been nice to tell me that this night shift is haunted before you sent me to this night shift.
A hospice nurse noticed the same unusually pale man visiting several patients just hours before they passed away. He wasn't related to any of them. He never appeared on any of the visitor logs, and according to the oldest nurse that was in the building, he hadn't aged a single day in at least 31 years. So I found this story on a forum, and it's about a woman who claimed that she worked the night shift at a small hospice facility in Northern California. And I'm going to call her Michelle. And as always, I have no way of verifying any of it, so take this story for what it is, and you can decide for yourselves. Now, Michelle said most nights there were pretty quiet nights. The nurses kept the lights low, families slept in chairs beside their loved ones, and the hallways were always filled with that soft hum of the oxygen machines. And death was obviously a very big part of this job. But after a few years, she had learned to recognize when someone was getting close to the end. But what she couldn't explain was this one particular visitor. So Michelle first saw him sometime after 2 in the morning, and he was sitting beside an elderly man named Mr. Keller. The man was very tall, very thin, dressed in a very dark gray suit that looked decades out of place. His skin was so pale that under the fluorescent lights, it almost looked colorless. So she assumed maybe he was a family member, but when she stepped into the room and asked if they needed anything, he didn't even answer. He simply just turned toward her, put one finger over his lips, and he looked back at Mr. Keller. She felt kind of uncomfortable with the interaction, but the patient appeared calm, so whatever. For the first time in several days, his breathing wasn't strained, his face was very relaxed, and one of his hands was resting on top of the stranger's. He looked pretty peaceful. But when she returned 15 minutes later, the chair was now empty, and Mr. Keller had passed away at 2:37 a.m. Now, the next morning, Michelle asked Mr. Keller's daughter about the man in the gray suit, and his daughter looked very confused, and she's like, no one else except for me has come to visit him at night, or even last night. And when she described him, the woman insisted she had no idea who he was. But she told herself that, maybe she misunderstood something, right? Maybe he was a chaplain, a volunteer, or a relative that the daughter didn't know about. Then she saw the man again. 3 weeks later, he was standing in a doorway of another patient's room. This time, it was a woman named Evelyn, and she had advanced lung cancer, and Evelyn had been barely responsive for about 2 days at this point. But when she walked past, she heard the woman speaking very clearly, and she's like, I knew you would come back, and Evelyn whispered, and the pale man leaned closer and said something that she couldn't hear. But when she entered the room, he was gone yet again. There was only one entrance, and she had been standing directly outside of it. The windows were sealed shut, and the bathroom was completely empty. Evelyn passed away before sunrise, and after that, she began paying a little bit more closer attention to the visitor log. She wrote down, dates and room numbers and every time that she saw him. And over the next 4 months, he appeared beside 5 different patients, and every single one of them passed away within hours of him visiting them. But the strangest part was that some of those patients weren't expected to pass that night. One man had been sitting up and talking to his family earlier that evening. Another woman had actually improved enough that her doctor was discussing moving her to a different care facility, getting her out of hospice. But after this pale man visited them, they were gone before morning. So Michelle finally spoke to a senior nurse named Margaret, and she had worked at that hospice longer than anyone else. Michelle expected her to laugh it off and be like, oh, it's this crazy guy, whatever. Instead, the moment that she mentioned the guy in the gray suit, Margaret's face changed. She brought Michelle into the medication room, she closed the door, and she asked her to describe him to a T, what he looked like. And she's like, he's very tall, he's very thin, nearly white skin, dark hair, combed neatly to one side, gray suit, no coat, no matter how cold it is, he's outside. Margaret listened without interrupting, and then she removed an old photograph from the back of her locker. And it showed several staff members standing outside the building during its grand reopening in 1995. And Margaret was in the photograph, much younger and wearing an old-fashioned nurse's uniform. And behind the group, standing near one of the windows, was the pale man. He looked exactly the same. And Margaret said that, she first encountered him during her second week at that hospice facility 31 years earlier. A patient had been screaming for hours, terrified of dying, but shortly after that man entered her room, the screaming had stopped, and Margaret found the patient smiling peacefully, and she said her brother had finally come to take her home. Margaret explained, but, hey, your brother has been, gone for nearly 40 years now. But according to Margaret, the staff had tried reporting the man several times over the years, and security cameras would show doors opening by themselves, but he never appeared on any of the footage. Patients and nurses could see him very clearly, as real as you and me are. Yet cameras captured nothing but empty hallways and empty rooms. Eventually, the older employees stopped mentioning him altogether. He became kind of like a legend amongst those that have been there for a while. They even developed an unofficial rule that if the man entered a patient's room, they allowed the family to know it might be time to come and say goodbye. So Michelle asked Margaret who she thought he was. Margaret said she didn't believe, him because, that he caused anyone's death. She believed he came because death was already there. But then she gave Michelle a warning, and she told her if she ever sees him anywhere except the patient's room, you need to leave the building immediately. Now, Michelle didn't fully understand what she meant by that. But several weeks later, she was finishing her shift when she noticed the pale man standing at the far end of the hallway. And every time, the patient's door was closed, he wasn't looking at any of them. He was standing directly in the hallway, staring right at Michelle. And he slowly lifted one hand and he pointed toward the nurse's station behind her. And sitting there was Margaret. And before Michelle could say anything, Margaret suddenly grabbed her chest and she collapsed. And Michelle called for help, and the staff worked on her until the ambulance had arrived, but Margaret passed away on the way to the hospital. And Michelle never returned to that hospice company after that night ever again. So let me know what you guys think. Was this an angel of death? Something more darker, more supernatural? Let me know in the comments.
Some kind of soul collector or something like that. That is crazy, but it almost seems like he was there to sort of let people know that this was getting ready to happen. Not quite the Grim Reaper, because the Grim Reaper that I know of is not a pale-faced man, but some kind of soul collector or something.
I had a patient who was close to passing. She was known for being extremely abusive to her children throughout her life.
Ooh, this one's freaky.
Yes.
I remember reading this one.
To the point none of them wanted anything to do with her, and she had 8 children. A couple of hours before she passed, she kept telling me that there was a man in her room and that I couldn't let him take her. I kept assuring her there was no one in the room, although she was persistent that he was going to take her somewhere really bad. She then proceeded to pray and ask forgiveness for over an hour. The last time I went and checked on her before my shift ended, she grabbed my hand so tight, and she said she knew she was going to hell. I looked down and realized she had several bruises on her chest right by her heart. She said, "He keeps pushing me downwards. Don't let him take me there." She passed an hour later, and the entire wing lost power. I have never questioned our maker ever again.
Oh, that gives me goosebumps.
I know. That was one of the ones I read last night, and I was like, oh, I should not do this
that one's
right now.
so scary. Imagine being so terrible that you just know you're going to hell.
She probably on some level already knew because of how you treated your children.
What would you do if this happened to you? This story comes from a viewer. She says she still can't explain what happened this night in the ER, and to this day she thinks that she came face to face with a real life doppelganger. On this particular day, when she had pulled into work, she was talking to her dad on the phone. He was at the airport getting ready to board a flight to Nevada for a conference. He sounded happy and he was joking around like always. They said their little goodbyes just as she walked through the entrance of the door. He was getting on his plane as far as she knew, and she started her shift. A few hours later, though, into her shift, the EMS called and they had a 70-year-old man that was unresponsive, and the ETA was about 5 minutes. The trauma team immediately started getting the bay ready, and she wasn't on the assignment to help set up, but she always responded to the traumas. And when it came through the door, she was finishing up what she was doing, and then she walked towards the trauma bay. And that's when one of the residents that she had came really close with came out into the hallway and stopped her and said, "You can't go in there." So she laughed, thinking it was a joke, and she asked, "What you talking about, Willis?" But the resident wasn't joking, and he looked at her completely serious and said, "Hey, now come take a listen. I have a story and it's creepy. It is time for a Denise Jewel story." The resident looked at her and said something that literally stopped her in her tracks. "I think that's your dad in there on the table." Her heart dropped, and as those words rang through her ears, she couldn't even stop herself. She shoved right past him and ran right into that room. And sure as the day is long, when she looked at that patient, every ounce of color left her face, because laying on that trauma bed was her father. In that moment, it wasn't somebody who looked at similar or somebody that was vaguely resembling him. This man had her father's full face, his haircut, his build, even had that same gray streak that was running through his beard. And as everything hit her, in that moment, she forgot that she was a nurse. She just stood there completely frozen. Then she began to move closer, desperate to prove that this wasn't him. But her moving in closer to him didn't help relieve that feeling, because when she did, she swore that that man was wearing the same exact cologne that her dad had wore forever. And as the team started the IVs, they called out the medications, that man's eyes suddenly flew open. And shout out to Jackie for fueling this story time, and she bought me a coffee. Thanks, boo. Child, when that man's eyes opened, everybody in that room stopped because his eyes weren't brown, they weren't blue, they were completely black, solid voids. She said she stumbled backwards, and in that moment, she knew whatever was laying in that trauma bay definitely wasn't her daddy. Once they got the patient stabilized enough and got him transferred up to ICU, the very first thing she did was step into the break room and call her dad. And y'all, this man picked up on the second ring. He had just landed in Nevada. His voice was calm, he was normal, and very much alive. She said she couldn't even find the words to tell him what happened. She simply just asked, "Hey, are you okay?" And she told him that she loved him, and then she ended the call. Grateful that that man wasn't her dad laying on that trauma bed. The hospital never got a name for that patient. She ended up looking him up, and he was still in the ICU for a while. This happened years ago, and she said she still can't explain it. She said that was probably the most terrifying moment of her career, seeing someone look exactly like her father on that trauma bed. So you already know, I gotta ask you, if her dad landed safely in Nevada, who or what did she help save that night? Let me know what y'all think about that down in the comments. And as always, have your best spooky day. Bye.
What the heck was that then? You knew when they opened their eyes, or its eyes, that it wasn't your father, but why would it present as your father?
Another creepy nurse story. This one not from the psych unit, but when I was a house supervisor. It occurred at a different hospital in a different county, and I did tell this story last year, again around Halloween, but I'm going to tell it again. We had, very sadly, one of our security officers had been unalived a couple hours before his shift was supposed to start. For day shift, I was the night supervisor, and that is a long story, very sad story. It doesn't really matter how, it just matters that it happened. And I was so sad. I could tell some stories about this guy. He was the nicest guy, the hardest worker. We all really, really thought the world of him that worked at Good Sam. Well, often the floors ran out of tube feedings. I don't know why, but I had to run to the kitchen because for whatever reason, they stored the tube feedings in the basement, in the kitchen, behind two locked doors. It was quite an ordeal to have to go down and get tube feed. But the patients often began to run out toward the end of the shift, and the staff would call me and say, "Hey, we need a tube feed." And obviously I'd get them one. Sometimes I'd even grab two just so it didn't happen again. But the kitchen, it was usually the kitchen staff came in about 5:30 to start cooking breakfast for day shift. So it was prior to that. I had to unlock the doors. It was dark and it was creepy. And you would walk into the main kitchen, and then you sort of had to go over to the right, go past some desks, and then there was a back room, like not in the back, but off to the side, where in the way back of that dark room was a shelf where all the various tube feeds were kept. Before you went into that room, if you just looked straight down the way, there were a couple of coolers, a couple of freezers where, again, I would have to often go in there and grab different food, items for patients if they ran out of milk or juice or whatever. But I looked all the way down at the end of the room, the main room, where there were sinks and stoves and everything. I looked down there, and as God is my witness, I saw this security officer standing there. arms in front of him, just standing there in his full uniform, looking very serious. My arm hairs just went up. I don't know if you can see that. He looked at me, I looked at him, and he just gave me a nod. At first, I was really, really wigged out. But then I thought, poor thing, he just came to work. And in a way, I strangely felt comforted because I thought, you know what? He's watching over me. And he just hasn't realized yet that his physical body is actually just on the other side of the basement in the morgue. And for whatever reason, he just wanted to come into work today. And I told some people that I saw this. Everybody believed me, so I was glad that nobody thought I was cray-cray. They all believed me. Some of them were creeped out and wouldn't go down to the kitchen anymore. But honestly, most of us did feel very comforted knowing that our buddy was there watching us.
This ICU nurse says she believes that some people hide behind the word of the Lord because they are hiding the devil's deepest, darkest secrets. This story comes from a viewer who used to work in an ICU in Detroit. She said a well-known pastor was admitted to her unit after suffering a massive heart attack. She said she ain't one to gossip, but y'all, according to the report, when they arrived to the church, the bass player had called 911, and let's just say the pastor's pants was down. And before I get too deep into this story, do me a favor and share this with your healthcare working friend, because, they're going to want to hear the tea on this one. She said she took care of him for 2 nights, and the first night that she had walked up to his room, she heard whispering. Not one voice, but several. And only the patient was inside when she opened that door, and the ventilator couldn't have been making the sounds that she heard. She lightened his sedation to do an assessment, and as he woke up, his eyes suddenly locked on something behind her, and he pointed at it. His heart rate shot up, his blood pressure started to climb, and he started to buck up against that vent. She immediately turned that sedation right back up. And then, as the room became silent, that's when she heard a man's voice say, "It is time, do, for some moral justice, do. He will pay for his sins." She looked around that room again, and she knew that patient couldn't have spoke. And she tried to convince herself that she was just imagining what she heard. Have you ever ignored something because your brain just couldn't explain it? Let me know down in the comments before I tell you what happened this final night. During the report, she had learned that his condition has gotten much worse. He was now a 1-to-1 patient. His family stood around the bed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something else was in there too. Around 2 a.m., the patient started circling the drain. His heart rate went up really high and his blood pressure went down really low. She adjusted the drips. The doctors ordered new medications. And then, shout out to Roxy for fueling this story time, and she bought me a coffee. Thanks, boo. This man's heart stopped. That long, steady beat just echoed through the room, and she swears right before they started CPR, she seen this massive, dark figure with horns jump right onto the pastor's body. The team pushed medications, they did CPR. They did everything they could to save that man, but the time was still called at 3:01 a.m. After everything began to settle down, she started to question herself afterwards. Was that stress, or am I hallucinating because of exhaustion? And then the ICU resident walked right up to her and looked her in the eyes and said, "Did you see Acidomius too?" So you already know I gotta ask you, was that dark figure there to collect that patient, or was that just exhaustion and a hallucination on the behalf of her and that ICU resident? Let me know what you think about that story down in the comments, and as always, have your best spooky day. Bye!
This is a story time of how when I worked at a nursing home, one of my favorite residents who turned out to be a past was being haunted and it went home with me. Since y'all liked my last story time about when I saw death in the retirement home, and at one of the last retirement homes I worked at, let me tell you about a time that I accidentally took some shit home with me. You know how some people will talk about how when certain people get into old age, they sometimes regret a lot of the shit they did to people of color? So it's 2017. I'm working in this retirement home. I have this specific gentleman that I always like take care of. Not take care of as in like this, I give him his medication, but we just had a bond. We was locked in. Old white dude, he loved to tell jokes that weren't funny, but of course, I'm doing a laughter shit anyway. And he would do the type of jokes where it would be like, what's the difference between a black pilot and a white pilot? And I'd think about it and I'd be like, I don't know. He'd be like, nothing. Why would there be anything different? I was a dietary aide at many retirement homes, but I would help cook his breakfast. He would like 2 pieces of bacon, poached eggs, which are disgusting, and wheat toast. So I'll bring his shit every morning. We chop it up, right? And he would always ask me because, I don't hide who I am. He'd be like, so you got any boyfriends? I'd be like, no, still single. He'd be like, and that's the way it's gonna stay. The nigga low-key rude to me because I'm still single. But I digress. One day, after me working out, I would say like a year and some change, he started talking to me a little bit deeper. And like, I would just look out for him and go above and beyond because he was just like one of the nice ones. And we kind of clicked from the beginning. He really never got close to people because, in retirement homes, if y'all don't know, the turnover rate be so high. Every month you work there, you're going to meet a new coworker because somebody's going to get fired or quit. So he never got close to any of the caregivers or the dietary aides because here one day, gone tomorrow. And since the turnover rate is so high, me being there over a year, he was like, he got used to me and comfortable. So one night when I was doing the dinner shift, he didn't come down, so I went up and brought his food to him. I wasn't supposed to bring the food to him because there was like the caregivers who would do that, but this was my nigga, so I was like, okay, he cool. So I brought it to him, and then me and him just started talking because, as you know, I talk a lot. Like, I'm a yapper. And he started talking to me, saying how I make him feel comfortable and he appreciates everything I do. And that he was honestly glad he gave me a chance because in his younger years, the person he once was, we probably would have never gotten along. But he was like, you remind me of a friend I once had. And when he said that, now I'm intrigued because I'm a nosy ass bitch. So I was like, because he got like a somber look on his face. So I was like, well, what's going on? What? He was friends with a black boy. And of course his parents didn't like it because, the time. And long story short, his other friends saw him playing with the black boy because him and the black boy would only play together in secret. But his friends saw him playing with the black boy. His friends pretty much humiliated the black boy. They didn't say what they did, but he used the term humiliated. So, and 2 days later, the boy took his own life. And he said, when I first started working there, I shocked him because I looked like what that boy would have looked like if he made it to adulthood. So I'm thinking in the back of my head, so the boy was a queen. And the man was saying like how one of his biggest regrets is how he joined in. And he used to have really bad insomnia. He used to take medication to help him sleep. It was that bad. He was like, every now and again, I still see that boy at night. And he was telling me how he could still hear that boy's voice in his mind 80 years later. But he was like, when I first saw you, you reminded me so much of him. I haven't been seeing him even when I can't sleep anymore. So I slowly turn around and I'm like, I am him. No, I'm kidding. I didn't say that. We talked for another 30 minutes and I'm like, this just befriended me low-key to atone for his sins. But I was so uncomfortable after our talk. But then, and this conversation isn't even the craziest thing a white person has confessed to me. I get home that night. It's hard for me to get to sleep that night. My mind is racing, which is unusual. Wake up, right? My mom is up because, my mom be up. She wakes up about 2 a.m. every day. She's done that all my life. And so I decide to get up early and I have all this restless energy because I can't sleep. So I get up and my mom like, what you doing up? And I'm like, I can't sleep. And she says, who is that? And I'm like, it's me, Mom. And she's like, no, not you. And she was like, behind you. Meanwhile, it's just me and her in her house. Now, I'm used to a walking spirit every now and again. She was like, there it goes again. So then I turn around swiftly because now she's scaring me. And I'm used to this, but this shit still be scary. Like, bitch, I'm a woo-woo spiritual, grew up in it, and I'm still scary. And my mom is just focused. She's like, no, shut the fuck up. She's like, there's a youthful energy in here that is not ours. So I tell my mom everything about the resident and what he told me. And my mom was like, this child just has a lot of energy. I think he just wants somebody to play with. And it broke my heart. And honestly, there's no big anticlimactic thing like expelling or exorcism. No, my mom just said a prayer. We opened up the windows and he was on about his way. Like, you don't always need all the tools and the gadgets. Sometimes prayer with a true intent will do. So moral of the story is, what you do in the dark will always come to the light. And what you think you get away with in the physical, you will have to answer for in the spiritual, no matter what you believe.
hear some scary shit? Facts or fiction? So, let's take this story to Alabama, a well-known med-surg unit. So, a nurse named Tasha received a report from the ER that she was getting a patient, and she's an overnight nurse. The ER had her all day long, and the patient was cool, but she had stopped eating. She had been found in her home, thrown to the floor after going to a concert, and they had to get a peg tube in her, so she was going to have surgery and everything else. She kind of laid there listless, but she was coherent, if that makes sense. All went well. They transferred the patient over, and the night stay begun. At about 12 midnight, Tasha states that the patient started making these weird sounds that she could hear from the nurse's station. Really breathy. So she walks down the hall, and she gets right to the threshold of the door, and she can kind of see the patient squirming in bed and making these sounds out of her throat, like making statements like, "Where's your mother?" Things like that. Startled, but being the brave nurse that she is, she goes into the room and asks the patient, "Is she okay?" And just like that, patient snaps out of it, and she says, "Yes, I'm fine." Girl, bye. Anywho, this goes on for the entire time that this lady is on the unit. She's gotten a peg tube. During the day, she's fine. But after midnight is when, again, the possession type of things start happening. Now, they said that the lady had mad cow disease, but there were no other cases of mad cow disease in the area. And the lady did not present as a mad cow disease case, nor did her x-rays confirm that, well, her CAT scan. What was even stranger, during the nighttime, the chaplain kind of roams to the hospital, and he went into that particular room. The chaplain ran out, spooked. He had a red handprint in his arm, and he states what is wrong with that patient. Nurse Tasha tells him, they said it's mad cow disease. He said it's absolutely not, and she needs an exorcism. Next day, the daughter comes to visit, and they let her know that, the chaplain came to see her mother and would like to pray for her mother further. And the daughter gets pissed, and she says, "I don't want him visiting my mom. We don't believe in that type of stuff." Next thing you know, the daughter is taking the mother out of facility, stating that she could die at home in peace. This facility also holds a morgue, so a few weeks later, doctor comes upstairs and tells Nurse Tasha, "Hey, you remember that patient? She's here, but she's in the morgue." Nurse goes down to visit the patient, and the body is given Linda Blair, Emily Rose. The nurse states that that was the freakiest thing she's ever been through in her life, and she's never met a case like that and has never had a patient make her feel that uneasy. Not to mention the heavy presence of something else in the room with her. So, is this story fact or fiction? It is fiction. Came from the mind of moi. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Some scary shit.
That was good. I was going to say she sounds like Reagan from The Exorcist, but that was good. All right, you all. So that is it. That is my creepy, scary, spooky nurse stories. I do have 2 other videos of scary nurse stories. I will link them down in the description if you want to watch those as well. And let me know if you want me to continue the series with these spooky hospital stories. And thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel and share with someone else who likes the paranormal. Also, if you are already subscribed, please make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I have a new video coming out. Stay awakened, stay rooted, watch that ghost that's creeping through your back door, and I will see you in the next video.